Welcome back, everyone, to Guilty Minds, a virtual conference on mens rea and criminal justice reform. So we're now ready to begin the final panel of the day, which is a special interview with Bobby Garcia. Bobby is the Assistant Executive Director at the Jesuit Restorative Justice Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization that facilitates restorative justice spiritual retreats in California state prisons and juvenile halls. Bobby's here today to tell us about his experience having been convicted of felony murder as a teenager in California for a homicide that he didn't commit or even know about until after he was arrested. So here to speak with Bobby about his experience is Matthew Mizel, who's an associate policy researcher at RAND, specializing on topics related to criminal justice and racial bias. Matthew's been teaching creative writing to incarcerated teens in Los Angeles since 2003 through Inside Out Writers, and he also mentors both youth and adults after their release through the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, which is where he met Bobby. Matthew's going to be handling most of the interview, and I'll drop by at the end and ask Bobby about some of his policy work, including his experience successfully advocating for felony murder reform in California years after his release. Bobby and Matthew, we're grateful to have you here today to speak with us. I'm now going to hand it off to the two of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for the introduction. I just want to take a quick moment to situate us in everything we've been hearing today at this great conference. What we'll be doing is we'll hear a lot from Bobby and his story and his experiences. I think will humanize a lot of what we've heard about the law, both in terms of mens rea and particularly felony murder. And that fits in with everything from the first panel today, which really focused on felony murder, all the way through discussions of such things as how the government can victimize people. And in our discussions earlier today also about how to affect policy change, and Bobby will be able to speak to some of that and the power of situating those with lived experience with these systems and how they can shape policy and law. So let's start by having Bobby talk a little bit about his background in his teenage years.
Okay, thank you everyone for having me here. All right, my name is Bobby Garcia. I'm just gonna take you a brief into my past to learn a little bit about me and my situation. I grew up in Hollywood, California. I grew up to two parents who met in some weird circumstances, but all was well till I turned about the age of 12, and that's when my father decided to leave our family and start another family somewhere else. My mom couldn't cope with my dad leaving because he was the sole breadwinner, so we had to go on AFDC, which is welfare, and we just had to try to survive on what we could get. During that time, my mom also developed a habit of drinking. First, it was just the occasional drink, and then eventually it just became where she became an alcoholic. So once she became an alcoholic, I kind of felt abandoned emotionally and physically because she wasn't there. She was always going out. And then when she was home, she was not really there. So that took me to find a new set of people to find belonging. So I went out into the streets and found people with similar situations like myself who grew up in dysfunctional homes. And most of these kids were already into delinquent activities, which is smoking marijuana, ditching school, and so on and so forth. So me wanting a sense to belong, I went along with what was going on. And then to a certain point where I liked doing the same things. Once I reached the age of 14, I joined a gang. And then joining the gang, I kind of in a sense joined a new subculture that had different value system than mainstream society. So in order to be valued, you had to show strength, you would have to show not caring and indifference. So I went from stealing car stereos, ditching school, and just being a delinquent. All that changed. And that also changed the subculture. It changed the way I dressed, the music I listened to, the way I behaved. So everything about me changed in those 2 years. When I was 16 years old, I got a little bit more heavily into the gang and I started hanging around with them more. So then one night in August of the 29th of 1992, I decided to go with one of my friends. His name was Leo. He had his dad's truck, which was a 1976 orange pickup. So me and him wanted to go out and hang out at the neighborhood park and just drink some beers. So while we got there, Leo and I noticed that nobody was there. But there was one person that was walking along that was one of our gang member friends. His name was Tayel. So Tayel wanted to hang out with us because there was nobody there. So we said, hey, let's look for another place to go to. So we went to South Central LA where we had another faction of our gang to go hang out there. But when we went there, nobody was there. So we knew that there was another faction of our gang in the San Fernando Valley where they had mostly young guys there. So we went over there and went to hang out, and there was people there. So we're hanging out, and there was about 20 of us just hanging out, drinking and getting high. As the night progresses, one of our gang member friends, his name was Eddie, wanted to go home because he had his girlfriend waiting for him. So we all said, okay, we'll take him home, and then from there, we'll just go home. So I was sitting in the cab with Leo, and there was 4 other individuals that went into the cab. I mean, into the bed. It was Elias, Eddie, and 2 females, Jane and Erica.
They're all sitting in the flatbed of the truck and back, right?
Yes, and they're sitting in the back. So we're driving, and we got the direction, so we're going along. And somewhere during that time from us getting there to the girlfriend's house, we're running out of gas. So he says, hey, we're running out of gas. There's nowhere we're going to make it back. So us in our criminal mind, we said, you know what, let's just rob somebody and let's just get a few dollars so we can go to the gas station, get some gas, and we can just head out. So everybody was in agreement, and we went to try to rob somebody. So we seen a couple arguing, because it was like 12 at night. They were arguing, and they kind of like brought our attention to them. So we went to them, and we just wanted to rob the male who was there. The male didn't have no money. So as we left back to the vehicle, Tayel, who was one of our co-defendants, he stabbed the victim 1 time and ran back to the truck. I didn't see it then, but this is what I learned after what had happened. So we're going straight down to drop him off to his girlfriend's house. And then down that route, that's when we seen the next victim. And then we attempted to rob him. So when we robbed him, we ended up getting a little bit of cash. And from there, we all ran to the vehicle. So I went back into the cab of the truck, and everybody jumped in the back, but Tayel had stayed back, and he stabbed him 1 time in the back. So when we got back, since we couldn't find a place and there was a lot of fear of what we went back to the neighborhood where we're hanging out previously. So we went back, everybody exited the vehicle, and then that's when I learned that these 2 individuals were stabbed, and that one of the females had wiped the blood of the knife onto her pants. So from there, we just hung around for a little bit more, and Eddie still wanted to go to his girlfriend's house. So me and Leo get in the cab again, and Eddie jumps in the back. So as he jumps in the back, he gives us the directions again, and we go to drop him off. And what we didn't know at that time and that night is we had just passed the crime scene where the stabbing had taken place. So one of the detectives who was on the crime scene noticed the vehicle, pulled us over, and we were arrested. And then from there, that's when we're in I learned about the felony murder rule and the implications of being involved in a robbery.
So they took you back to the police station, right?
Yes.
And then what happened from there when you got back to the police station?
So when I go to the police station, they take me to the interrogation room, and they're asking me what happened. So at first, in a criminal mindset, I'm trying to deny any participation in the crime.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in the subculture, that's what I was taught. So then when
I think a lot of people on this conference would even, as lawyers, tell you not to admit to anything at that moment as well.
yeah, so I end up denying, and then I start talking. But then when he told me, hey, you know, since you admitted to the, oh wait, started denying. Then I said I wanted to see my lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, it's okay, we'll get you a lawyer later. Let's just go over some of the questions. So he kept interrogating me, and that's when I admitted my participation to the robbery. And after admitting the participation in the robbery, that's when he told me about the felony murder rule. And I remember the detective standing over me. I was 16 years old at the time. And he goes, you know what, youngster, if you were 18 years old today, we'd be seeking the death penalty for what you were involved in. But because you're not 18, we're going to be seeking life without the possibility of parole. And I remember telling the detective, hey, but I wasn't involved in the murder. I had no intention to kill anybody. I was just trying to get some gas money to go back. And he goes, it doesn't matter. California state law is if you were involved in the robbery, you're going down for first-degree murder. And then that's when I was taken back to the holding cell, and then I was waiting to get processed to go to the juvenile hall.
What was your reaction when you heard that?
My initial reaction is I just couldn't believe it, because I was remembering back to when I had exited the vehicle at the hangout and being told this, and that memory just came back. And then he's telling me, the detective, he's telling me that I'm going down for premeditated murder. So I couldn't understand what he meant premeditated, because I was like, wait, that wasn't the whole idea. It wasn't to go kill someone. But yeah, as a 16-year-old, I just couldn't know. I didn't really know how to process that. It was just a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure. Then what happened from there?
So from there, I was subsequently transferred to Sylmar Juvenile Detention Center and booked in for first-degree murder. And since I was booked as a murder suspect, they put me in a high-risk offender unit, which is where they placed everybody and isolated them from the rest of the institution. So you're kind of like placed in the hole and just kept there. You had no interactions with nobody else and no other units. It was just your unit. That's it. You go out by yourselves. You have limited access to programs like the rest of the unit. You're just slammed down.
You spend most of the time alone in your cell, right?
Yes.
And then what happened next with your case?
So 3 days later, I'm arraigned in Pasadena juvenile court. And I was told that I was going to have a fitness hearing to see if I was eligible to remain in the juvenile, or if I was going to be sent to adult court and charged as an adult. But before that, I had to get interviewed by a psychiatrist to see if, what my mental state and stuff like that. So I went through the psychiatrist, had the interview, and she assessed that I had the mental capacity of a 12-year-old. And they submitted that to the court, but the judge said, if you missed any of the criteria, you didn't qualify for juvenile. And since murder was a serious crime, I automatically was sent to adult court.
Yeah, and for those listening, that's a law that changed 3 years ago in the state of California. There's still 5 criteria, but now the law is written such that the judge is supposed to consider the youthfulness of the defendant and weight that and weight the other variables differently than previously. So, so you were sent to adult court, right?
Yes.
And then you got to adult court. Take us from there.
So once I got bound over to Superior Court, adult court, I was transferred from the juvenile facility to another facility in downtown LA where they housed all the juveniles who were being charged as adults. And then being transferred over there, it was just insane, and seeing how many kids were being charged as adults. At one time, it was just housed for one bed per individual, was 2 beds per individual. And all these kids were getting like life sentences, life without parole. And it was just an eerie feeling just being in that unit and hearing all these sentences that they were handing out.
Yeah, to give a little context, so those are the units that I have been teaching in juvenile hall, though now it's back at Somar. In the 2000s, it was so full of kids being charged as youth that not only did they put 2 kids per room, they put these buckets in the day room where kids would sleep in the day room because they didn't have enough room to house all the kids. So continue on, Bobby.
So I ended up going to court. I went to my preliminary hearing, and they just went through the whole process. And after the preliminary hearing, before we went to trial, that's when my attorney approached me with the deal that the district attorney had, I guess, sent to me. So the first deal that the DA gave me was 35 years to life, and for first-degree murder. And I remember telling my attorney, "Why am I gonna do 35 years to life in prison for a premeditated murder I didn't do?" He goes, "It's felony murder." So I said, "No, that's a lot." So they came back with 25 years to life. And the attorney had told me that the DA has stated if I wanted to get out Sunday or never, because if I took it to trial, I would be getting life without parole. So I didn't even have a long time to ponder. They gave me about an hour. And so then I said, "You know what?" And he goes, "Don't worry about it," my attorney said. He says, "You'll at least get out when you're in your 50s or 60s. And I was just amazed at how he could just say that so nonchalant when it's my life. And I'm only, at that time, I'm like 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And,
how many times did you talk or meet with your attorney?
So I met my attorney with him twice and maybe 2 times on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
But he had really no interest to help me. I that was evident. And I didn't know how to like try to see if I could get another one, because my family doesn't know about law. We don't know. So we're just dependent on him to help me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just, okay, I'm just stuck. And yeah, and then took the deal, got sentenced for 25 years to life. Then as soon as I was sentenced, I was already 18. So the sheriff.
How did it feel to take that deal and hear that sentence?
No, I remember walking into the courtroom and just looking at my mom and my family and seeing them crying. And I remember just telling them, "Hey, it's gonna be okay," you know. But in my heart, I knew I was done. But I was just putting on a game face to, show that,
Mm-hmm.
don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay. But if there was any moment that if I could wish I could die, it would probably have been that moment, because in a sense I was already dying, sent to prison for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And and I just got sentenced, and it was just a complete silence with me and my co-defendants as we're riding back to the county jail.
How many co-defendants did you have?
Altogether, we were 6.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all the ages from 14 to 17.
And how many of you knew that how many of you were actually did the murder?
Only one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted. Continue on.
So I remember the sheriff telling me since I was 18 years old he was going to let me go back to the juvenile hall to pack up, because they were going to transfer me over to the county jail.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember going back to the juvenile hall, and right away the counselors told me, "Hey, pack your stuff, because they're going to be coming to pick you up tonight. And you can't take this, you can't take this." And I was scared, because now I was going to be placed in an adult facility with, what I already knew was hardened people, because, they've been doing this all their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I got transferred over, and I remember being in the holding cell waiting for processing in the county jail. And I was wearing an orange jumpsuit that said on the front of it said Central Juvenile Hall. And all these are men coming in, walking in. They're like, "Hey, youngster, you made it to the big house." And I'm like, "Man, I'm being processed right now." They're like, "You're gonna be okay. There's a lot of people here." And to me, it was an ugly feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I got processed, and then there was a new subculture I had to adapt to.
Mm-hmm. Where'd you go from county jail?
So from county jail, I went to the California Youth Authority,
Mm-hmm.
because before they could sentence me, they had to have an evaluation to see whether or not if I was amendable to treatment in a California institution till the age of 25.
Mm-hmm.
So after the clinical evaluations, they determined that I was amendable to treatment till I reached the age of 25.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went back to sentencing, the judge said that it didn't matter if I was amendable to treatment. What mattered was I was taking a deal for state prison, because in the deal I was saying 25 years to life in state prison, and he was going to follow that. And he sent me to state prison.
So where'd you go? State prison first.
So the first prison I went to was Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember driving up in the green bus that drives up to the institution with all of us. And I remember the big gates opening and telling myself, this is it, I gotta, make it or break it. And I remember through the whole processing, I was like scared, but you can't show fear because you're in an institution that preys on weakness. So you just got to play it off like you've been there many times. And I remember walking into the unit, and I had my bedroll, what they call a fish kit, where I had the hygiene and stuff. And I walk in, and I remember vividly walking into the middle of this vast building with all these cells, and everybody's looking at the new guy. Let's see who these new guys are. So everybody's posted on their doors looking, and I'm just looking at them, and I'm seeing all these people that are way bigger than me and were muscle bound, because back then they used to have weights on the yard, and they had these big mustaches and tattooed everywhere. So I was just trying to keep a straight face. And I remember one of them calling me to the door and asked me what my gang affiliation was. And I told him, and he's like, "Don't worry, little homie, we're going to let you know who your homeboys are, and they'll kind of school you on what's going on here." And
What level yard was this?
So this was a maximum security level 4. And that's usually where they send all the youth that were getting sentenced.
Yeah. That subsequently changed about 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 years ago. So now youth don't go to level 4, which is the, as Bobby pointed out, the maximum security and most dangerous yard. So now there's at least that cutoff to try and avoid a little bit of this, but go on.
Yeah. So I go out, and then after 10 days, and then I get orientated to how to basically live prison life. I remember my first gift to get myself together was some drugs that I could trade for a TV and commissary just to get what I needed there. And I was just blown away because I was never a drug dealer. So I was like, how am I going to sell drugs if I never sold drugs? So I had to ask my cellmate if he could help me facilitate this, because I didn't know how. And he's like, "Don't worry, you'll get the hang of it after some time." And and then my life just spiraled out of control after that.
How did you survive being in prison?
So the first 10 years, I had to survive by adaptation. I had to adapt to the culture. And in some weird way, luckily I was able to acclimate to this type of culture because I lived it when I was outside. It was just like 10 levels higher, but I was just going with the flow. And I knew that as long as I go with the flow and not voice my opinions, that I'll be safe. So that was the only thing, because to lead a gang meant death, and to show weakness meant death. So there was a lot of death around. So I had to try to like survive. So I was just on survival mode.
And you said it was like that for the first 10 years for you, right?
Yes.
And then what happened?
So then some change of events happened 10 years later in my time. I was already in my late 20s, and I was starting to see life different. You know, I wasn't seeing myself that impressionable by the people around me, but I still knew the seriousness of complying with what goes on. So I ended up getting a cellmate during that time, and this cellmate happened to be wanted by the prison gangs. I guess he did something or crossed somebody that put a death wish on him. And I remember a couple of days later, I get a note from a guy that says, you know what, your cellmate, has to go, and you're gonna do it. And I remember getting the note and reading it and just staying stunned for a couple of seconds, because I'm like, this is real. And I knew the implications if I did it or didn't do it. I was like caught in a pickle. And then I knew I wasn't a murderer, and I didn't want to kill anybody. So I just remained quiet that day. And it was kind of hard to keep a straight face to him those next couple of days, knowing that what I had heard about him.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess he knew what was coming. So I guess on the third night, we're eating dinner. They served us our trays through the tray slot, and I'm giving them the trays back. So as I'm giving them the second tray back, I remember when the correction officer looked behind me, kind of like curious, like he was curious. And when I turned around, that's when the guy hit me in the face. So then we ended up fighting, because the door was closed, and if I don't fight, I was gonna get really seriously beat up. And they took us out. And at that point in my time, I already knew that my time was up with the gangs. And one of it was because I didn't comply with the rule. And then the other one was, I already showed weakness. So from then on, I had to make a decision. Either I was going to remain and try to like fix it, or I really had to leave the gangs. And and the thing that was so interesting is, to a normal person, it would be easy to do good things. But for me, it was hard, because I was trained and conditioned to do all the bad things. That for me to tell an officer, look, I can't be here because, I don't want to participate in this, and I know my life's in danger. That was hard. And I remember when I had did it, they had transferred me over to a sensitive needs yard, which basically means people who are non-gang affiliated or who are wanted, and so on and so forth. But before they placed me there, they had to put me in the hole so I can go to the classification committee. So I remember those 3 nights that I was in classification, I remember I cried on a daily basis at night. And it wasn't because I was scared. It was more because I was ashamed that I defected on the gangs and left the gangs. The people from when I was 14, when I wanted to search for somebody to give me a sense of belonging, I was actually leaving later on in life. So that was the hardest, because I lost my identity in everything I built up to that point.
Yeah,
So it was losing your identity.
No, go ahead, Bobby. No, you go ahead.
So losing your identity was actually a blessing. At that time, that was another time if I could die, I wish I would have died. But it actually was a time for me to start working on myself and to try new things.
And then let's jump ahead a little bit. Are you still there? Bobby, you still there?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, okay, let's
Yes.
jump ahead a little bit then towards what your kind of briefly your next 10 years, and then when you have the opportunity to go before a parole board.
Okay, so the next 10 years, uh, feeling basically emotionally naked, and no sense of any type of coping skills. You know, I started being attracted to go to self-help groups in education. So I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and other self-help groups to try to work on myself. And I didn't have really no formal education. So I was like, the first thing I could do is try to get a GED. So I started pursuing that. And then little by little, I started finding myself. I started finding out the root causes of why, you know, I did the things I did, the resentments, the anger that was involved, the pain. So in a sense, through all that time, I was finding healing. And I say healing because it's something I continue to do today. I'm not healed. I'm always in a state of healing. So that's when I started finding healing in my life. And then once I found the healing, I started giving back. So I started helping my community, people that are in my facilities, and started passing it forward. And then from then on, I ended up getting a couple of AA degrees, vocational degrees. And then I had an opportunity to go in front of the board of parole hearings. So in June of 2014, I was making my first appearance to the board. And mind you, the board is very strict on who they release. They don't just release anybody. You had to really earn it. And me being a level 4 inmate still, because of all my past violence and being my first hearing, my initial hearing, there was like a less than 1% chance they were even gonna consider me going home. Because at that time, they would give everybody about 3-year denial, how you come back, and then maybe really reassess letting you go. But during that time, you know, I just told them who I was, the rotten person I was, the better person I became. And during that time, Senate Bill 260 had came out. And Senate Bill 260 is a bill that helped out youth from 16 to 18.
So Senate Bill 260, for people in the audience, allowed for youth who had been tried and convicted as minors, people under age 18 have been tried and convicted as adults, to petition the court for relief and to have the youthfulness at the time of their offense be considered. And so basically at 15, 20, or 25 years, depending on your sentence. So people who got sentenced for 50 years can now go before a parole board much earlier. All right, so continue on, Bobby.
So at the end of the hearing, I remember the commissioners, I remember one question they asked me is that if they feel that I have been rehabilitated, right? And if I deserve to go home. And I remember telling them, you know, I don't deserve to go home, but I remember saying, I just hope that I have an opportunity to show and demonstrate that I will change my life around. And I have been doing it. So at the conclusion of the hearing, they said that their decision to release me was not based on the first 10 years, but the last 10 or the last 9 and the significant change that I've done in my life. They realized that I was impressionable to gangs, impressionable to people. So they already knew the hallmarks of youth, and they used Senate Bill 260 to kind of justify and explain why they're finding me suitable. So from then on, it just went to the governor's office. And the governor didn't oppose. And then I was subsequently released January 14, 2014, yeah.
So I want to cut ahead. Not that your return and reentry isn't incredibly gripping too, but I want to just get to what's So Michael, there's a little bit of time. I just want to get to what's happening with your conviction right now, your felony murder conviction.
Okay, so I help with Senate Bill 1437, which is the felony murder rule that got overturned in California. I was a part of that process. And right now my case is before the Pasadena Superior Court, and it's going to be going into order to show cause next month. And it's possible in the next couple of months that they'll remove the murder and put what I was guilty for as the robbery. So that should be happening in the next couple of months if all goes well.
What's the prosecutor's position on this?
So the prosecution is trying to, or they put in a brief that said that if I am found to be eligible to overturn the first degree murder, that I should be given second degree murder under implied theory. And then the rebuttal from my attorney said, you can't recharge this guy with implied theory if this was never an issue in the beginning. You can't bring it up late into the process. So that's like where the discussion is going. They're just trying to see how they can, the DA is trying to lower it to second degree and use an implied theory.
So DA's not giving up, in other words. So let me hand it off to Michael now, because he wanted to ask you some questions about the work you did and getting that law passed. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, Matthew. How's it going, Bobby? I remember the first time we spoke and you shared your story, which was, and we got to this point basically. I just remember being completely blown away and moved, based on the power of redemption. And, your story illustrates in a lot of ways some basic some basic policy principles that we see in the criminal law, right? So the kind of felony murder policy under which you were convicted most often is justified based upon this idea of dangerousness or controlling dangerous people. And the thing is, you went into prison really not being that, right? Not having a propensity towards violence. And after 10 years in prison, you were just about to sort of, pass that line. And then, you went a different direction. And so, your story illustrates so many amazing things. And yet there's this whole other piece of it, which is that you got out, and as you're kind of making this transition back, you start getting involved in policy work. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what what you've done and kind of like what your experience has been like doing policy reform advocacy.
Sure. So when I got out after some time, I got introduced to the Anti-Recidivism Coalition through the Human Rights Watch. When I went to the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, known as ARC, I got involved in ARC, and ARC asked me if I would like to get involved in policy work to continue helping those who were young to try to get a second chance at going home. So I said, yes. So they said, you know what, we have a new bill that's coming out, it's 261, that increases the age limit to, was it 23?
20, under 23.
Under 23, yeah. So would you like to be a part of this movement? And I was like, yeah. So I remember my first day being at the LAX, getting ready to fly to Sacramento to do a lot of legislative work. And I remember going there and being scared because one part of doing this policy work was I was going to have to share my story. Because, you have to share experiences of people's lives so they can see it. And I remember being scared. For one, I was going to be judged. I was thinking, they're not going to want to talk to me. So I'm walking down these offices of assemblymen and senators. And I remember meeting one senator, his name was Lara. And I remember him taking me in and says, you know what, I've heard of your story. And because of you, that's why I'm supporting this bill. And I remember meeting his aides and them taking me around so I can talk to people. And I remember Lara telling me, he goes, I know you might be nervous, but just know that you're doing it for other people. And he goes, sometimes, there's things bigger than you. And then I was like, wow, that's true. That's how I felt. I was like, okay, I'm doing something that's now bigger than me. And that's what I have to do. And I felt that was my passion. So I got involved in 261. Then I got involved in 439 that keeps kids younger than 12 out of the juvenile halls. Then I got involved in 1391, which prohibits 14 and 15-year-olds from being prosecuted as adults. And then the last one was Senate Bill 1437, which started a couple of years ago, that they wanted to use my case to kind of illustrate what felony murder can do to somebody.
How did you feel about that initially? I mean, was that an easy decision for you, or was it a hard one?
No, it was kind of difficult, because one thing is I have 2 daughters, I have a family, you know, I have a home, I live in a neighborhood. And I was kind of scared that by them talking about my story, it was going to come back to haunt my immediate family and circumstances. I didn't want people protesting in front of my door and stuff like that. But I knew that more people were going to be involved by me saying yes. But I still remember back to when I was told there's something always bigger than you. So I said, yeah, you know, I'll do it. And then from there, I was making a lot of trips to Sacramento. I remember meeting Senator Skinner, who was behind that bill. And I remember her telling me, you know, thank you for having the courage to do this. I know it's hard, but, you know, I'll walk you along the way and we'll do this. And I remember her from previous groups. So I was very familiar with her.
Were you surprised at how receptive people were? I mean, you know, you had your expectations going into these meetings, and then you had the lived experience of being in there. Were they kind of like what you expected, or you know, things kind of go differently than you might have expected at first?
I was kind of surprised that I didn't get the dirty looks that I thought I was gonna get. Like going on the Republican side, yeah, I wasn't too surprised, but they were cool people, you know. And but it was good meeting all these people, and then the fact that they just gave me the time to talk and share my story. And I remember even some says, look, your story is very profound, but you know, my district just won't support this, and I won't support this. And I just told them, hey, I appreciate you being honest with me. You know, that's what you can do. Just be honest. I'm not even mad at you. And yeah, and it just went on. And then I met Assemblyman Jose Medina, who was going to take it on to the last step. So in between that, on April 27, 2018, I appeared before a public Senate safety committee, and I was there with Senator Skinner and another person. We gave testimony, so then it passed out of the public safety committee. Then in August of 2018, it went in front of the assembly, and that was the last step. And that's when I met Jose Medina, who's the assembly member from Riverside. And he told me about him being a school teacher and sharing the story and telling me, you know what, I want you to be there that day when I'm talking on the floor, because I'm gonna mention you and I'm gonna point at you. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that day, that final day where they voted on the bill?
So that day, they flew me in. I had an exam I had to do. So they were trying to they were just telling me to stay home. But then other people were just telling me to go. So I went, and then I remember meeting up with them. He goes, hey, I heard you have some college exam going. I hope it's not going to mess you up. And I was like, no, I want to do this. And he goes, look, you're going to go into the top, to the gallery. I forgot what it's called, the gallery, I think.
Yeah.
So he goes, just be there, sit on this side, because as soon as I start speaking, I'm going to mention you, talk about you, and then I'm going to point at you. And he goes, don't be nervous. And I was like, yeah, it's easy for you. Right? You do public speaking as a normal. But I remember being there and then talking about the bill. It gets introduced. And I remember the votes, everybody started voting. And then at that time after he spoke, I remember I was getting text messages just because they were watching it live through the networks. And they were telling me, you know, people's families are telling me, thank you for being brave. You know, I hope this helps my son. I hope this. So I was getting all these texts right away. And that was making me more nervous. And then I could see all those senators voting and that assemblyman gets voting. And then it stood still for a while. And then that's when I started learning about politics, is when they started making the phone calls.
Yeah.
So the attorney who's next to me is texting somebody who's texting somebody, and then you see aides running all around. And then I was like, okay, this is the political process. And then later on, some more yeses start going up. And then there was one that was wavering. And I think the governor ended up calling him directly. And then there was a yes for him, and then it passed. And yeah, it was almost like a movie. Like, I don't know if I was saying like it was like West Wing or something, but it was something that I never was exposed to, because, you know, I'm a kid from the neighborhood, and now I'm thrusted into this big arena, you know, where people are making laws and people's lives, you know, are at stake. It was just it was kind of like a great feeling, but at the same time, it was like scary.
Did you connect it, you know, with like everything you had been through? Did you feel kind of like, you know, right, so you had gone through this whole experience, the reason for most of that, right, was this felony murder policy, and then you get out and you kind of throw yourself into this process, and the outcome is that policy that, you know, kind of put you down this path, you were able to be a part of changing that, you know. What did that feel like?
Well, it kind of hit home because I always had a cellmate when I was in prison. He'd always tell me that he was for felony murder. He didn't even know the murder was going to happen. He just dropped the person off. He always maintained his innocence. And, you know, a lot of people just didn't pay attention to him. And then I remember getting a call from his wife. And she tells me, look, right now he's going to, you know, he's going to court for that, because this is some time transpired from when it passed to then. And she goes, you know what, he might be going home because of you. And I go, not because of me, it's because of a lot of people, but I helped, right? And yeah, and then the next you know, I'm at his court hearing when they're letting him go. He was in downtown LA, going to the CCB criminal courts building, and they're letting him out. And I remember him turning and looking at me, his eyes were all watery. And I just gave him like a thumbs up. And I was, in my mind, I was like, you weren't playing after all. You know, it's like, because, you know, that's how we got along inside. And then they let him out. And he had life, and he actually had life without parole. And now he's out and he's doing good. And, you know, he's just like, so much time has passed, because for him, about 28 years have passed. So that's fulfilling. And then lately, I've just been seeing a lot of people I know that are finally coming home and reuniting with their families. And they all accept culpability for what they did. They're just glad that it's been fixed and now justice kind of has been served. And they're just hoping it doesn't happen to more people. So that's why we're glad that the 1437 happened, because now it's getting them as they're going in, and when the cases are now going fresh. So that is something that I'm, you know, I thank God that I'm a part of.
It's amazing, Bobby. So we're about to wrap up. I just want to give you one last chance. Or anything else you want to say? You know, maybe give us a sense of kind of like what lies ahead. Are you going to be, you know, is policy advocacy something you want to keep on doing? Really opportunity to say whatever you want before we wrap up.
Yeah, you know, I've been listening into and I'm very amazed at all these distinguished people sharing their insights, and, you know, it's a lot of stuff that I never knew, so I got really educated. I just want to thank everybody for just being a part of this process to kind of discover and figure out how to work the best methods to deal with the human life, you know, because we are talking about humans. And a lot of times we're talking about kids who are affected by it, because kids are the ones that end up doing all the work, you know, doing all the badness. But what I do want to say is, because of a lot of people who believed in reform, that's why I'm out. And because of that, that's why I have 2 daughters. I'm a homeowner now. I'm an executive director for a prison ministry. So I just, you know, I'm pushing on, and hopefully in the next few months, I might be given a pardon from the governor. Right now, I'm under the pardon consideration. I've already got my certificate of rehabilitation. So now maybe in a few months, you might get an update that I got a pardon. So, and plus with the Senate bill relief from 1437. So I just wanted to share that and thank everybody for listening in and listening to my story.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Bobby, and thank you, Matthew. Yeah, this was really incredible, and thank you for sharing your story. So with that, we're about ready to bring day one of Guilty Minds Conference to an end. Thank you, everyone who participated, and thank you, everyone who watched. We will be starting up tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and 12 p.m. East Coast time. So see you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.